Take responsibility for your life. Achieve fulfillment with recovery. Check out responsiblerecovery.net.
Hello to all the suffering addicts, and hello to all the people who found sanity in the recovery lifestyle. In this episode of Stories of Addiction, I will be speaking with M and her addiction in alcohol. M is a 29-year-old alcoholic with adventures in alcohol that she'll be speaking about. Welcome to the podcast, M.
Thank you.
So let's start by, how did your addiction start?
So I'm actually going to go all the way back for this one. We're going to talk about my parents, mostly because I fully believe that addiction is so much more than who we are as people. It was our environments. It's the people who raised us. It's, all of that. A lot of people you'll hear say like it wasn't, I don't want to blame anything, but these things have effects on us for sure. So I was actually born to two parents who were alcoholics, and they also had a drug addiction. What that drug of choice was, I do not know. I was born in Arizona, but I know nothing about that state because we moved directly after. We moved all the time. We moved from Arizona to California to Barstow, California. Like, we were all over. Basically, whenever they ran out of money, we were on to the next place. So I had, well, at the time that I knew, I had two half siblings. I had an older brother, I had an older sister, I had a younger sister. So we had a large family. And so I lived with them until I was about 4 years old. And I can remember, I don't know if you've ever been to Barstow. It's not a great city to drive through. It has a huge drug problem, so they kind of found their place in it. But I remember so many things where it was just not the life that a kid is supposed to have, you know? I remember my biological mother asking my sister and I to go to the local liquor store and go steal some, like, Twinkies and Ho-Hos for her. And then, I remember the police barging into our house, like, because my dad was getting arrested for something. Like, we were free-range kids. We took care of ourselves. We took care of each other. We were always getting into trouble, and we had absolutely nobody there to tell us any different because they were so busy with their own addiction. And, like, I can remember just people coming in and out of our apartment, and we moved so many times, even within Barstow. We had a house at first, but of course they couldn't afford it after a while. So then we had an apartment, and then we were living in a motel, and, it was just a downgrade at the worse their addiction became. Of course, I didn't know that as a kid, but I can see that now as an adult. The downgrade is a direct result of, like, them getting deeper into their addiction. And so when I was about 3, my oldest half brother and sister, they were taken by their dad. And so they left, and then it was just the 4 of us. It was my older brother, my older sister, me, and my younger sister. And there came a point where my parents, to the best of my, recollection, just couldn't take care of us anymore. And so my grandparents actually took us. And my grandparents were actually my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and her second husband. He wasn't technically my biological grandfather, but I'd never met my biological grandfather, so he was the only grandpa I knew. So we moved in with them in Southern California. And that was, it was good, but there was always something missing. When you don't grow up with your biological parents, they always have, like, parent day at school. They always ask you to do, like, a little tree thing as a project for school. And you just can't do that. And it's, a little bit of a bummer. But, I know that my grandparents tried as hard as they could. My grandfather was always very active in my school life. And they did the best that they could. But when I was, how old was I? I must have been 10. My grandmother developed breast cancer and spine cancer. She actually passed away. We had her in hospice care in our house, and I was there actually the day she died. And then after she died, the house was actually in her name, so we couldn't stay there anymore. So my grandpa took us, all 4 of us, my older brother, older sister, and younger sister, and me, to NorCal, to his daughter and her husband's house. And that was a lot. There were so many, because they already had a kid. They had a kid that was outside the house. They had like 5 dogs. His daughter's husband actually was in a wheelchair, and so like there was just not enough space for all of like the kids and stuff. And so when we moved up there, it was a free reign again. We had, because there were so many kids, they just didn't have enough energy and like time to watch all of us. So we were outside and doing our own thing, which was actually kind of fun. I'm not gonna lie. It's, you know, I have some really good memories of just like rollerblading outside or biking to the grocery store and all of that good stuff. So it wasn't all bad for sure, but you know, definitely not enough of adults watching over the children. But probably in about August of 2000, my maternal aunt and her husband actually came and took my sister, my older sister, because they wanted to be able to help out, and they knew they could, you know, adopt, but they wanted to start with one because they didn't have any children of their own. So they took my sister, and that actually went pretty well. So they had her for a couple months. So then it was just me, my older brother, and my younger sister. And it was actually at that time that my grandpa's daughter's husband molested me. And so I was 11 at the time, and it started out super innocently. Like all the kids were like, oh, let's give each other massages or whatever. And then everyone left, and it was just me and him, and he was like, why don't I give you a massage? And I knew stuff wasn't right when he started to kind of move lower and lower. And then like it all happened so quickly, and I felt so numb. But then he asked me if he could hold me after, and I wanted to scream, no, you can't touch me anymore. But I was 11, and of course I was just like literally just sat there in shock. And so I just let him. And then the next day he actually, and again, he's in a wheelchair, so there was a part of me that was always like, why didn't you just run? But it didn't make sense. We'll get there. So the next day we're doing some yard work or whatever, and he pulls me aside and he goes, you can't tell Grandpa, you can't tell, you know, my wife, because if you do, I'll go to jail, and you know, you'll upset everybody, and you're basically going to break up the family, putting it, of course, on me, because it would be my fault, not him taking responsibility for his actions. And so that secret I ended up carrying with me for a very long time. We'll touch back on that.
Take responsibility for your life. Achieve fulfillment with recovery. Check out responsiblerecovery.net.